Hello and welcome to another episode of Scott Reads Comics. Today I'd like to cover a very special collection, my last and best Hanukkah slash Christmas present from my wife Emma, who is a book artist. I, months ago, provided her with what I consider to be the beginnings of a definitive Suicide Squad collection. And for my present, she bound them into a beautiful, bespoke graphic novel, collecting those issues in a sewn hardcover. And today I'd just like to spend a little time going through it with you and sharing it with you because it's just such a great, unique, and wonderful present and a celebration of one of my most favorite comics of the 1980s and early 1990s, The Suicide Squad. So to begin, I made color copies of Suicide Squad #1 and of the house ad that ran shortly before Suicide Squad #1's release. I also, from the dollar bin, and most of the books from this collection came from dollar bins, I grabbed a very beat up copy of Suicide Squad #31, and Emma was able to cut that out and use that for the spine title, which is great. So we have the cover to issue 1, the house ad, and then the actual logo for the spine title from one of the later issues. And the little things are great too. Here she put the little SS logo there, little signature, 2022. And this idea for me is not original. This came from an interview Michel Fiffe, the incredible creator of Cobra, which I've covered on this show. Please check it out. He was having a discussion with the cartoonist Kayfabe guys. It was one of their artist discussions, and he talked about doing a similar thing. He sent his issues to actual binderies, and they're beautiful and cool, but mine are bespoke in the sense that they're made by a person, and each one is its own unique artifact. So my plan long term is to do the whole series this way in these collections. Probably take 4 or 5 all told, depending on what I ultimately decide to include. But the first one, we're going to go through the contents now. So no discussion or coverage of Suicide Squad in the 80s and 90s can be complete without Legends. And if you've been watching my channel, you know that I have covered Legends each issue in detail. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm only going to show you that indeed all 6 issues of Legends are included, and they rightfully begin this volume because you can't really have a Suicide Squad collection in my mind without Legends, because this is where they begin. This is where their modern incarnation begins again. And I believe Michel Fiffe made this point in the interview when he was talking about that particular volume. So all these issues of Legends with the awesome John Byrne artwork, the Len Wein and John Ostrander story, the awesome Carl Kessel inks, all in here, all the way through #6. And you may have noticed too on my show, I've covered Secret Origins #14, which stars the Suicide Squad. It's the story of the Silver Age Suicide Squad and this latter Bronze Copper Age Suicide Squad, their beginnings. And it's by the same creative team, John Ostrander and Luke McDonald, that are going to launch the series. Now, Dave Hunt is the inker versus Carl Kessel, who starts the inking on the series. So, and it covers all of that stuff. All the histories, the tragic histories of both teams. And here's stuff that we haven't looked at yet on the show. Here's Suicide Squad #1. So we have Legends 1 through 6, Secret Origins 14, starring the Suicide Squad, and now Suicide Squad #1 with the awesome Howard Chaykin cover, which features on the cover of the Bespoke collection here. And we have John Ostrander, Luke McDonald, and Carl Kessel for the first 3 issues. And I'll talk about this because my plan on my show, ultimately, it's a long-term plan, is to actually read all 66, 67, 68 issues of the original series. So I'm not going to go in detail in each of them here, but we're just going to page through and kind of enjoy it as an overview. And we can see the Luke McDonald pencils and the Carl Kessel inks are a very nice combination. And you're going to see that through these first 3 issues. Great house ad for the new Justice League. These 2 series were launched in tandem out of Legends. Young All-Stars was also came out of Legends in the end of Crisis, because Crisis sort of removed the existence of the old All-Star Squadron, so Roy Thomas got some new Golden Age characters to play with here. Kind of cool. Great stuff here. Love the design Luke McDonald came up with for Belle Reve, the prison that also doubles as the Suicide Squad's headquarters and base of operations. Very cool. Brutalist style architecture here for this Louisiana-based prison that became the Suicide Squad's home. This first issue, of course, we'll go into in greater detail in a later episode, introduces all of the supporting characters, and it's such a rich cast, and it makes the Suicide Squad that much more believable and enjoyable because they have this rich cast of supporting characters. And again, I love newsprint, and this newsprint is just awesome. High quality. Joe Tunheim, the Suicide Squad's target in this issue, in the subsequent issue, number 2, in Quarak, which is, I guess, the equivalent of DC Comics' version of Iraq. They were going to take out some terrorists. Very cool. Great double page look into the history of the start of the series. And I love this piece here. This would be a great poster. I may make a color copy of this and include it somewhere in one of the future volumes. Well, Emma will. I don't do any of the work. I just collect the material and she does her genius work on it. Number 2, very cool. Continuing that the first story. And here on this splash page, you really can't see the brilliance of Kessel's inks on McDonald's pencils. They really strengthen them. Very nice work there, shading and everything. Just great looking stuff. House ad for Keith Giffen, drawn Dr. Fate Limited Series. Another great house ad with some Jim Aparo featuring Infinity Inc. and the Outsiders. So many great house hats in this period from DC. I'm a sucker for house hats from both companies, and I keep saying, I'm going to say it maybe every other episode, however long it takes. Print a collection of house hats. I will buy it. Other people would buy it. I just think they're so cool. It's a great look into what the companies were doing during a given span of time. Nemesis, very cool. They had a great way in this series of grabbing old characters, underutilized or forgotten characters, bringing them back and making them cool in this weird milieu of super villainy and super agents and covert ops. So that's one of the things that endeared Suicide Squad to me. It had a certain verisimilitude to it, even though it is a superhero comic or supervillain comic, if you will. It's raw, it's rougher, it's dirtier. The stakes are higher. Characters die as befitting the title, and so we get to see that play out over years. And thank goodness that they had 5 good years to tell so many incredible stories. Not all of them were great, but many of them were, and many of them were solid. Maybe they weren't great, but they were solid. And they had some interesting artists. Luke McDonald really put his stamp on this series, but later on, they had John K. Snyder III. They had Jeff Ursherwood. Grant Meem comes in and does some excellent fill-in issues. Graham Nolan does an annual. Eric Larson does the Doom Patrol Suicide Squad special, which is actually included in here as we move along. Here's issue 3. This is Kessel's last issue. This issue covers some fallout from Legends. Glorious Godfrey, whose mind was broken by the helmet of Dr. Fate. Darkseid wants him back. Just look at this. This is just phenomenal work by the art team here. And John Ostrander, as time grew on, commanded these characters with a deftness and an expertise that was rarely seen elsewhere. And joined later by his late wife Kim Yale, she added a lot to the stories as well, and they were just filled with pathos and payoff. There was always a good payoff to the subplots. There was never a lot of dangling subplots. They always managed to tie stuff up. Not everything. There were a few. The Wild Huntsman subplot didn't really pay off. But there were many that did, and they were great. The pie throwing that went on later, all this stuff we're going to cover. This is just a preview of what we have to look forward to when we read these issues, and I love what Emma does with these bespoke collections for me, and I'll show more on the channel as we move along. I have a stack of them. I get one every year for my birthday, pretty much. I get one every year for Christmas and Hanukkah. I get one maybe on our anniversary. So these things start to add up, and I constantly go back to them. I'll grab one when I'm bored and want to read something. I've got some pretty eclectic bespoke collections here. Great house ad here. This looks like, yeah, that's John Byrne. He's fully in the DC stable at this point. This is an impactful event here which will affect the squad later. That's a subplot that pays off. Number 4. This is one of those stories that's good but not great. It's a one-issue story, a one-issue joint. So, like I said, they're not all great, but they're usually pretty good. And many of them rise to that level of greatness. Oh, now this is one of those stories that's legit great. This is a 3-part story running through 5, 6, and 7 that involves the squad going to Soviet Russia and really getting into some thick, hairy trouble. So yeah, Flight of the Firebird, very good stuff. Everything that is the Suicide Squad is embodied in these 3 issues. And in fact, it was this issue with this brilliant Luke McDonnell cover that actually got me buying Squad off the rack. I bought Legends off the rack, and then for some reason, I saw Suicide Squad 1 through 5, but I wasn't picking them up for some reason. This issue grabbed my attention. I picked it up off the rack. Immediately after reading it, went to Eyes and grabbed the other 5 issues, which were still easily available. So it was this cover that sucked me in with Deadshot targeting Enchantress. Just brilliant. Kind of reminiscent of that Captain America cover where Deathlock is targeting Captain America. So very cool. And again, I should add that with issue 4, Bob Lewis came on. Carl Kessel leaves. Bob Lewis comes on, and he starts doing the inks. And his inks are solid. He and Luke McDonnell marry up well. He's not as his inking style is not as enjoyable for me as Carl Kessel's on these pencils, but it still works really well. It's, again, look at this. This just the color, and Carl Gafford does the colors for pretty much the entire series, and the shading and the coloring just match you perfectly. And we have just amazing work here for this, again, this weird milieu of supervillainy and covert operations. There's Deadshot, and it's great too that many times in the series characters are not in costume. They are plenty, but there are lots of times, like on this operation, where this is Deadshot, it's Floyd Lawton, but he is dressed as a Russian soldier. And Ostrander adds these cool wrinkles to the characters, like, who knew that Floyd Lawton spoke fluent Russian? But he does, and it proves invaluable on this operation and behind the Iron Curtain. That kind of stuff. And Penguin is used in this one, and he's great. He's not dressed as the Penguin. There's no umbrella. He's dressed as a monk. He still has his trademark monocle. But he's brought in not for gadgets and gimmicks, but for the fact that he is a master planner. And he proves that through this series, through this 3-issue series as part of the team. So, again, Ostrander knows these characters. He knows how to weave in characters from the DC universe. Obscure ones, as I've suggested, like Nemesis, later Shade the Changing Man, but also established characters like Deadshot, like the Penguin, and use them to their best ability. And do some characters die? Is there dross that is sacrificed? Yes, Mind-Boggler comes to mind immediately. Shrike is another one who comes to mind later on, and we'll see her in a later issue. Great use of the Soviet superheroes here, the People's Heroes, I think they're called. Very cool. Just good stuff. Look at that. Look at that. So brilliant. Deadshot's even deadly with any weapon. But here he's actually hit in the head with an ashtray by Nemesis and knocked out. Great sequence there. Now here's another one of those obscure characters, Black Orchid. Very powerful. Early on, one of the most powerful members of the squad. She doesn't show up often, but when she does, she's incredibly effective and always kind of mysterious. So, John, and at this time, editor Robert Greenberger, I think, had a lot of creative input too, and he was riding herd on all this, and it was just a brilliant result. Here's Black Orchid here, kicking the crap out of some Soviet super heroes. Captain Boomerang, just made fully three-dimensional in this series. Before he had almost been like a caricature in all those Carmine Infantino Flash stories. But here he becomes, for lack of a better term, a lovable sociopath, really, if such a thing is possible. And the squad, more often than not, suicide notes, they had a great letters page. And you will see later on, a certain someone shows up in that letters page. Yes, me. I actually had my first printed letters in Suicide Squad, and really excited to read some of those embarrassingly gushing letters on the show as we go forward. Oh, excellent Gorbachev there. Every now and then, the series would have these crazy personal files issues, and there was not a lot of action in them. They were basically just little vignettes of inside the lives of these characters outside of their missions. And these issues are some of the best issues in the entire 5.5-year run of the Suicide Squad, because, again, these stories serve to solidify the characters, to make them real, to give that fancy word I use, verisimilitude, the seemingness of real life to these characters. And that is the kind of thing that makes you love them or hate them in the case of certain characters, like Tolliver here, this government operative who's trying to blackmail the Suicide Squad. And again, Amanda Waller, she's always at the head of things. She's always a step ahead. Sometimes she gets jammed up with some of her schemes and machinations, but for a character with no superpowers, she is the head and the driving force of this team of superhumanly powered and dysfunctional individuals. This guy would eventually become the new Manhunter in the new series with the great Ostrander would write that, and I think Doug Rice would initially do some pretty great pencils on it. I think Grant Meme drew it as well. So there was some cross-pollination between Manhunter and Suicide Squad, and they would I think in Millennium, the limited series that was after Legends eventually was Millennium, which is a multi-issue crossover across many titles in DC. Very cool, these personal file stories. This one delves into the problems with June Moon and the Enchantress. Here we have another obscure character, Madame Xanadu. Awesome, she shows up. Great shot. McDonnell is so good at these close-ups of people's eyes. Really lets you get into their character. Very cool. And is Enchantress controlled now with this talisman for the time being? So, very neat. Oh, I always loved this panel as a kid. Just perfect. Oh, the perfect combination of excellent pencils and inks and beautiful color application by Carl Gafford there. And some of the marks here too that the artist like that McDonnell makes here are just very distinguishable to him. Yeah. And I always love the sound effects that our letterer is throwing in there. And I apologize. Oh yeah, it's either Todd Klein or John Costanza. This sequence here, great for fleshing out Deadshot as again a whole person who is dysfunctional but real, as he develops an emotional attachment to his therapist, Marnie. So very, very gripping sequence there. And Lament sort of realizes that, hey, among this incredibly dysfunctional group of individuals, the person who's probably the best adjusted is Captain Boomerang, Digger Harkness. And the reason why is he fully embraces who he is. And in here, even though he's supposed to be treading the straight and narrow as a member of the Suicide Squad, he's masquerading as his dead partner, Mirror Master, on the side, which is pretty cool. And that's a subplot that eventually pays off. So many of them do. And you want to talk about humanizing characters here at the end of this Personal Files issue, which is narrated by Simon Legrieve, who is the kind of psychologist for this team of incredibly dysfunctional supervillains and out of place heroes. He finishes up his narration. He's up all night, and who comes in but his wife, and so revealing that he has this solid, steady relationship with this other individual, and again, that gives him just a more well-rounded character. Here's a little house ad for the Millennium, which is coming up, and here it is, the Millennium crossover. And I forgot to mention, after a certain point, Jerry Bingham has a run on this series of doing covers. Now that's not Bingham, that's Luke McDonnell. But starting with issue 7, Jerry Bingham does the most amazing covers. At this point, I don't think Jerry Bingham, who did some Marvel 2-in-1 for Marvel, isn't doing much interior work, but he's doing these fantastic covers, which, how could you not try the issue with a cover like this? At least pick it up off the rack and page through it. So this is a Millennium tie-in, which ties in with the Manhunters and a bunch of other stuff going on, and we'll cover it. This is a great issue where the Suicide Squad has a member, Slipknot, who's basically the equivalent of a red shirt in Star Trek. He ends up getting his arm blown off. Oh yeah, and Bronze Tiger gets his leg broken by these Manhunter robots. The pencils on this issue are a little looser. Lewis's inks are a little weaker in some areas, but still great. Still gets the job done. And this is, of course, too, the debut of Duchess, who, again, that's a subplot paying off from issue 3, and this is issue 9. So Ostrander is a master at weaving this stuff in and finishing it off and bringing it all the way through to new levels of story. Great house ad for the new Green Arrow. Very cool stuff here. And this also finishes off the Karen Grace relationship with Rick Flag, as she was revealed as a traitor and then ends up sacrificing herself. So very cool. And here we have the obligatory Batman team up. He's got to show up. He'll help the sales of your book. But they find a good way to put him in. Look at this splash page. Totally awesome from McDonnell and Lewis. Really great. This is a rare issue where Carl Gafford is not coloring this. Juliana Ferriter is coloring this one. So, and this is the introduction of a great, probably after Simon Legrieve, my favorite support character, Father Kramer, who shows up to try and minister to this group of extremely dysfunctional individuals. And so imagine the uphill battle of setting up some kind of ministry amidst a group of murderers, thugs, supervillains, and even the characters who don't fit in those aforementioned categories are broken in some way. The heroes are broken. Bronze Tiger's broken. Rick Flag is broken. Nightshade is broken in her own way. And here we have Duchess showing up really on cue here. And it's not really that big of a mystery who she is, but it takes them a while to admit to themselves, the characters to admit to themselves who she is. And here's Flo Crawley, another great support character, and a character. Many of these characters are echoed in Michel Fife's Cobra series too, which kind of gets a lot of its inspiration from this title. Great how Batman infiltrates Belle Reve to see what's going on there. And oh, this is so awesome here. This more than half page shot of Batman hurtling forward. Nice Batman from Luke McDonnell and Bob Lewis. And of course, the support staff, these guards are no match for Batman. But what about a new god like Lashina / Duchess? Well, he pulls on her what he did in the Batman Hulk team up many years before, drawn by the immortal Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. He stuffs a bomb in her, or a gas bomb in her mouth and leaves her choking. And of course, Batman being there wakes Deadshot up to come out of his cell and take him on. But he has some thing with Batman where he, even though he can't miss, he never manages to shoot Batman or at least kill him because, I don't know, he likes the chase or whatever. But crack, Batman knocks him out. Then here we have a brief, brutal struggle between Rick Flag and Batman kicks his butt because he's no match for Batman. We have the inevitable showdown between Amanda Iron-Willed and Batman Iron-Willed, and he leaves warning them that he'll be watching them. So this is where, at this point, between this issue and the next issue, the Doom Patrol Suicide Squad special, I kind of figured out, it took me a little while to figure out, I think this is where it should be placed continuity-wise. So I threw that in. It's a great combination of the old squad, or the new squad, and the new Doom Patrol teaming up. Look at that. And it's got Eric Larson pencils, Bob Lewis inks. So it's the two creative teams of the two different titles, because by this time, Doom Patrol is 2 or 3 issues in. And John Ostrander does the plot. Paul Kupperberg, the writer of Doom Patrol, does the script. And we have Rick Flag leading a team of truly disposable villains, not our usual villains. And here's the new Doom Patrol here. Arani, Tempest, Celsius, Tempest, Robot Man, and Negative Woman. And this occurs in a Latin American country where Hawk has been kidnapped, and the Suicide Squad is going to extract him. And there's this really obscure team of villains: Mr. 104, the Weasel, the Thinker, and oh gosh, I forget this woman's name. But anyway, she has mental powers. So yeah, they're going to extract Hawk from this prison that he's found himself in. He's an extreme, like, right-winger trying to fight the communists in Latin America, and he's found himself in prison. And somehow the Doom Patrol get roped in. And again, we're going to cover this in detail on the show. But really great pencils from this is early in Eric Larson's career in comics, and he's really dealing it out here. Pretty great. Somehow Rick Flag winds up with the Thinker's helmet on and kind of gets possessed by it. The Rocket Reds show up. And eventually, pretty much all of the villains die in this. So Rick Flag's entire team, save for himself, die. And one of my favorite DC characters of this time period, Steel Wolf Stolnivuk, shows up to fix things because it's becoming a political fiasco. So they send him to fix things. Here's Weasel. Eventually he's going to get gacked. Oh, that's almost Frank Miller-esque there. That's a great panel from Larson and Lewis. Awesome. As he snaps this guard's neck with malign intent. Great shot of Mr. 104 there. Really powerful but weird villain. Has elemental powers. Here, Steel Wolf basically just takes Hawk and throws him out of the prison, freeing him in his own inimitable style, and walks off. Flag, possessed by the Thinker, kills the Weasel. He finally gets the helmet off. Everyone dies in this one. Pretty great. There's Zastrow, another great supporting character. I think he originally showed up in Firestorm. So they have a little two-pager where they tell the whole story of what happened. It's got a good wraparound cover, which is neat. Then we have a two-parter here toward the end. This is the introduction of Vixen. Great addition to the team. She's on the team from here almost to the end, with a few absences in between. Maybe at the very end she's gone from the team by that point. But again, really good stuff. This is a kind of a drug issue where they take on the drug cartels. And Speedy, who, another great Jerry Bingham cover, wow. Speedy, who was an opioid addict, heroin addict, features prominently in this issue. So another cool thing, like Briscoe and Sheba, his helicopter, they're almost like support crew, but really unofficial members of the team. This is a very Airwolf vibe on this one. Airwolf was a show in the 80s with Jan Michael Vincent featuring a helicopter that was basically like an attack helicopter. Great. The Weird is a great limited series worth covering on the show. Bernie writes an artwork in it is awesome, and I can find these in dollar bins, so I'll hunt them up for the show. Again, most of the issues that are in this Bespoke collection are from dollar bins. Suicide Squad number 12. I think this is our last issue in this collection, yeah. So this finishes up the drug story. Oh, again, Rick Flag is not involved in this story because he's away in Latin America, elsewhere in Latin America with that other squad team dealing with the Hawk situation. But Black Orchid shows up and is bulletproof. Very cool. So here, Flag shows up at the end during the debrief, and they reveal that everyone died on his mission. And Captain Boomerang says, "The only one, Struth. That's a bit thick, isn't it? Even by squad standards." It wasn't his fault, the Man of War says. Never read this. John Byrne, Kurt Swan, and Jerry Orway. It's probably pretty cool with that creative team. Pretty neat ad, but it never got me to buy. And this one ends on a somber note because even if you do interdict a large shipment of drugs, it just creates a ripple and the drugs keep coming. Again, Suicide Notes always had a very active letters page. So our next Bespoke Suicide Squad collection will be coming up maybe for my anniversary. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, that's going to open up with a crossover with the new Justice League title, so that'll be fun. And on the end notes here, Emma attached a piece of the Suicide Notes letter page from issue 31. Very cool for the end notes. So yeah, that is my Bespoke Suicide Squad collection. Thanks to Michel Fife for inspiring me to ask my wife to do this for me, and thanks to Emma for making such an incredible holiday present for me. And thanks to you for watching. If you liked this episode and my content in general, please hit the like button and subscribe, tell your friends. And I will bring you more later on Scott Reads Comics. Thanks for watching.